Unconditional love is something that some people search their entire lives for. Some are lucky enough to be born with it from their parents, but the reality of life is that it's not always sunshine and rainbows. There are people who long for the unquestioned love and support of just one soul in this world, and sometimes that can be a hard thing to find. Some people are lucky enough to find it in their significant other, which can lead to finding a similar yet different unconditional love from the children they might have with that significant other. Ultimately, though, what it boils down to is that nobody wants to be lonely throughout their entire life. We as humans crave companionship, whether we like to admit it or not. On top of craving companionship, we all want to be loved in one way or another. When it comes to finding that love, as difficult as it can be, there's one form of unconditional love that can be found rather easily for the most part. That would be the love that we receive from a pet. Whether it be a reptile, a cat, or even the traditional man's best friend, a dog, there's nothing like that feeling of coming home from a long day of work and having that best friend there waiting to happily see you. That moment when you walk in the door and they run right up to you, wanting to show you some love, is just such a special moment that can easily be taken for granted. The love that we receive from a pet is something that should be cherished, as it's oftentimes one of the most innocent and pure forms of love that you'll ever find in your life. That form of true, unconditional love is something that, in my opinion, is truly important to experience at least at one point in your life. Whether it comes from a pet or a person, knowing that someone will be there by your side through thick or thin is something that provides a very hard to describe sense of comfort and stability. Knowing that even through the darkest days, that love will always be there for you. However, with that being said, the only downside is the pain of losing that love. As far as pets go, losing your companion is something that hurts on a really deep level. It's painful to think that one day, that friend who waits anxiously by the door for you to return might not be there waiting. That type of loss is something that can truly be hard to process, and honestly, some of us never get over that loss. Sure, over time, the pain might get easier to deal with, but it still hurts nevertheless. When it comes to processing these kinds of feelings, there's one specific episode of one specific show that always comes to mind. It's an episode that, if I'm being honest, always breaks me. But it's an important one for people to see, in my opinion. It's an episode that comes along with a very special lesson that a lot of us never thought we'd find from a show like this one. And that's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're going to check out the episode of Futurama called Jurassic Bark. But first, I really just want to say thank you so much for being here and for clicking on this video. I really can't thank you enough for being a part of my YouTube journey, and I'm so incredibly thankful that we get the chance to check out this episode together. As this one starts out, we see Bender in the mirror practicing a magic trick with his lovely assistant and best friend, Fry.
Behold, the milk has vanished. Exiled, perhaps, to another dimension.
Amazing. That's why they call you Bender the Magnificent.
No, it isn't.
Fry looks closer at the newspaper that Bender threw in the trash, and he's surprised to see a headline showing that archaeologists discovered a perfectly preserved pizzeria underground, just like the one that Fry used to work at back in the 90s. He turns to Bender and tells him that they should go check it out so that Bender can see how Fry used to live before they met.
You lived before you met me?
Sure, lots of people did.
Really?
Just like that, we cut on over to the treasures of the Stupid Ages Museum. The two enter, and Fry finds himself enamored with all of the wonders of a life that he once lived. As they're in there, a tour guide enters in the middle of giving a tour as she shows off an ancient pizza paddle that she believes was used to discipline the delivery boy.
Wait a second. This is Panucci's. I used to work in this exact pizzeria. And for your information, lady, this was not just used to paddle my butt. It was also used to move pizzas and crush rats.
I I don't know where you get your facts, sir, but I am a volunteer housewife with 45 minutes of orientation and a Harlequin romance about archaeologists.
Don't wave your fancy degrees at me.
Fry explains that he recognizes what everything in here is. He goes to a case where he sees some petrified sausages, the remains of a dedicated customer, and the fossilized remains of an old friend. Just like that, we get a flashback to August of 1997. We see a dirty and starving-looking dog as he watches Fry delivering a pizza across the street.
Pizza delivery for a Mr. Seymour Asses?
There's no one by that name here or anywhere. I hope that in time you'll realize what an idiot you've been.
I wouldn't count on that.
Fry ends up in the alley across the street, enjoying the pizza that was ordered as a prank, and as he does, he's approached by the dog who seems just so sad and hungry. Fry ends up sharing the pizza with the starving dog, who he decides to name Seymour, and he realizes that he can relate to the dog on a personal level.
People think you're just a dumb mutt who smells bad, can't find a girlfriend, and has a crummy job. But you're keeping it real, and you call no man mister. Well, goodbye. Live long and prosper.
Fry gets really upset about the fact that this museum has his dog on display for people to gawk at. He picks up Bender and uses him to smash the case open, but when he tries to leave with Seymour, the security guards stop him and throw him out. We then cut back over to Planet Express, where Fry is telling his coworkers about what happened.
Why don't you try protesting like those native Martians? Always whining that people don't treat their ancestors' bones with respect.
Yeah, protesting never works.
You're right. I'll give it a shot.
Back over at the museum, we see Fry outside with a boombox. To protest, he decides to do what he declares his people's native dance while he plays some ancient disco music and starts to boogie. While he continues to dance, we get yet another flashback, this time to July of 1998, where Fry is just returning to Panucci's Pizza after a successful delivery.
I'm walking on sunshine. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That a boy, Seymour. Right here waiting for me as always. Just like that huge mushroom in my shower.
We cut to inside of the pizza joint, where Seymour is getting praise from Fry's boss for being their good little mascot. Seymour shakes some water from his coat, left over from swimming in the sewer again, as Mr. Panucci uses pizza dough that he's tossing to dry him off.
Yo, there's dog fur on my slice.
Nah, that's vermicelli. No fur in here.
He's so cute. He can do two things at one time. Eat and swim. Ooh, three things.
As the flashback ends, we cut back to Fry, still boogieing 3 days later. Leela tells him to stop, fearing that he'll come down with some sort of fever, and just then, the paleontologist who discovered his dog comes up, letting him know that they won't be giving the fossil back because there's just too much that they could learn about dogs from his time by utilizing it.
His name was Seymour. He was once intimate with the leg of a wandering saxophonist. He had wet dog smell, even when dry, and he was not above chasing the number 29 bus.
The 29? Interesting.
That's all I needed, right?
I'm good.
Okay then, here's your dog back.
Seymour!
Back at Planet Express, we see Bender doing magic again, this time with Zoidberg as his temporary assistant while Fry is away. Zoidberg ends up ruining the trick, and as a punishment, Bender ends up smacking him with his magic wand repeatedly. Just then, Fry walks through the door, completely elated about getting his dog back. Bender just doesn't get it though, as he offers Fry a garbage can to put Seymour in. Fry, however, seems unfazed as he excitedly explains that Professor Farnsworth has come up with a plan to clone Seymour using the DNA that's been preserved within the fossil.
Can you believe it, Bender? I'm gonna have my best friend back!
Later on, we see Fry and the gang upstairs as the professor prepares to clone Fry's dog. He explains that underneath the crunchy shell of the fossil, there lies a creamy core of dog nougat that will work perfectly to replicate Seymour as he once was. The professor even has the ability to retrieve Seymour's memory so that he'll still remember Fry and all of the stuff that they once did together.
I'm gonna get my puppy back! In your face, Grim Reaper!
Crappy, ineffective Reaper.
I just need to reset the clonomat from human mode to dog mode.
The dog says...
Uh-oh, this may take a while.
As the professor bangs on the machine to correct the malfunction, we cut back to another flashback, this time to December 31st, 1999, otherwise known as the day that Fry was cryogenically frozen. Seymour sits nearby, watching Fry play an arcade machine in the pizzeria when Mr. Panucci stops him, saying that he has a delivery ready to go out. Fry argues with Mr. Panucci, saying that he wants to stay and celebrate the new year, but his boss argues, telling him that he has nothing to celebrate, because he's a delivery boy in this millennium, and he's going to be a delivery boy in the next millennium. Fry begrudgingly grabs the pizza and starts to walk out, but Seymour bites his pant leg as he cries, almost as if he knows that Fry is going to be leaving and he won't be coming back.
I won't be gone long, Seymour. Just wait here till I come back.
We cut on over to a building labeled Applied Cryogenics, to the exact fateful moment where Fry accidentally falls into a cryo chamber. Just like how it played out in the first episode, we see Fry walk into the room, realize that the pizza was ordered as a prank, and take a seat. As the clock strikes midnight, he tips back in his chair and accidentally falls backwards, plunging right into a cryo chamber to be frozen for exactly 1,000 years. And just like that, we cut back to the future, where we see Fry unloading some treats, toys, and a collar that he bought for Seymour's return. Bender ends up confused, thinking that Fry actually bought all this stuff for him. However, when Fry tells him that it's all for Seymour, Bender ends up showing his jealousy.
Are you on a junk, Fry? Why are you wasting time on a creature of inferior intelligence?
Hey, he was smart. He could fetch.
I can fetch.
He could dig up bones.
Hello, Charlemagne? Plus, I bet he couldn't create a laser show with his head.
Fry tells Bender that this has nothing to do with him. But Bender, being the selfish person that he is, argues, saying that's impossible. As Bender leaves, we cut back to yet another flashback, this time to January 1st, 2000. Fry's parents are gathered around the table, waiting for him to arrive so that they can have New Year's Day brunch together. Fry's dad tries calling him, but he ends up having to leave a message. Just then, they hear the familiar barking of Seymour outside of their door. Fry's dad opens the door, and everyone is surprised to find Seymour running in without Fry, considering that the two of them go everywhere together.
I'm telling you, the Y2K computer's got him. We'll face burning roads, rivers exploding, calculators transformed into Scud missiles. There's nothing we can do.
He's trying to tell us something. Maybe he can lead us to Philip. Should we follow him?
To our deaths, negatory. It's the Y2K trying to lure us into an ambush, and I ain't buying it. Pass the baloney.
Back over at Planet Express, we see Fry excitedly setting up Seymour's doggy bed while Leela and Amy practice hand-to-hand combat. Just then, Bender walks in with his new robo-puppy, trying to make Fry jealous, but Fry seems generally unfazed. As that's happening, the professor chimes in holographically to let everyone know that the cloning machine is finally ready. They all head upstairs, and the professor explains that they need to harness the natural power of molten lava to make the device work. He pulls a lever to descend the platform that they're all on down to the sub-basement, and next thing you know, we see the fossil of Seymour being zapped in an effort to create the clone. As the DNA extraction process is just about to begin, we see Bender walk through the door in his magician outfit, telling Fry that they have to get to the talent show that they signed up for.
I'm in the middle of something.
But if we don't perform, in what sense do we have an act?
Bender, enough. Leave me alone.
So that's how it is, huh? I thought you were my friend, but if you love your dog so much, maybe you'd rather play fetch. Now I'm all you got.
Fry hits Bender and cries, calling him evil for what he did to Seymour. But Bender doesn't really care, saying now that Seymour's been melted, they can go back to being friends again. However, the professor chimes in, saying that odds are Seymour hasn't melted quite yet because the casing of the fossil is made of dolomite, which is very resistant to heat and should be okay for at least a few minutes.
I'm going in after him! He'd come after me!
In the flashback, we see Seymour running around town, going to all of the places that Fry would often frequent. He goes to the barber shop where Fry got his haircut, the putt-putt golf course that Fry loved, and even the 99-cent store that Fry would shop at. After running all over town, Seymour finds himself at Applied Cryogenics, where the janitor is throwing out the pizza box that Fry was eating from upstairs. Seymour runs in, and we cut back to the future where Fry's friends tackle him to stop him from diving into the lava. We see Fry standing there, crying over the pool of lava as Bender comes up to offer some comfort. He confides in Fry, telling him that he selfishly thought Fry was just pretending to love the dog to toy with his emotions.
Fry, I'm sorry. I should have understood how someone can love an inferior creature, because I love you. Not in the way the ancient Greeks, but the way a robot loves a human. A human loves a dog, and occasionally a gorilla loves a kitty. I'm going in!
The professor tries to tell Bender that he can't go in the lava because he'll melt, but Bender argues, saying that he's 40% dolomite. Bender dives on in, and as he swims to the bottom looking for Seymour, we cut back to January 1st, 2000. In the Applied Cryogenics lab, Seymour is in front of Fry's cryo chamber, barking at it repeatedly, much to the hungover employee's dismay. At that exact moment, Fry's parents walk in, having gotten a call from them about Seymour being found there. They walk on up, seeing Seymour enamored with this specific chamber, but they don't even pay close enough attention to notice that Fry is trapped inside. They put his leash on and drag him away as Seymour cries and begs to be reunited with his owner. We then cut back to the future where everyone is worried that Bender has been down in the lava for way too long.
This is all my fault. I let my best friend risk his life just to get my dead dog back. Bender!
And that is why they call me Bender the Magnificent. Hey, where'd everybody go?
Later on, we see everyone happily gathered around the cloning machine. It begins to drill into Seymour's fossil, and as it analyzes the DNA, we see a computer pop up results saying that this is a canine that lived to be 15 years old. Fry is taken back by this number. As he realizes that Seymour lived 12 more years past when Fry went missing, he decides to stop the cloning process, smashing the professor's machine with a wrench. Bender asks him what he's doing, and Fry explains that Seymour already lived a nice full life and probably already experienced love from a new family.
I had Seymour till he was 3. That's when I knew him, and that's when I loved him. I'll never forget him. But he forgot me a long, long time ago.
As the episode comes to an end, we cut back to the year 2000, where Seymour is sitting outside of Panucci's Pizza, waiting for Fry to hopefully return. Time keeps passing as the seasons change over and over again. With each change of the season comes the change of trends and styles of the people who walk by, as we see the years keep passing. What doesn't change though is Seymour waiting in the exact same spot, refusing to move. We see Mr. Panucci grow to be an old man, closing down the shop for the last time and saying goodbye to Seymour, who still hasn't left that exact spot. The shop ends up boarded up years later, as Seymour is old and frail, but still waiting for Fry outside. Then, finally, the episode ends as we see Seymour lay down and close his eyes for the last time, having waited the rest of his life for his owner to come back to him. I gotta be honest with you guys, this episode still messes me up now just as much as it did the first time I saw it. I've rewatched this entire show a couple times, and every time I always struggle to get through this episode. This right here is a prime example of what I'm talking about when I bring up unconditional love. Seymour met Fry when he was just a young dog who ended up being abandoned, living on the streets. He was starving and scared, but Fry was the one person who was kind enough to share some food with him and show him some love. In return, Seymour gave Fry his unconditional love even up until the day that he died. The ending of this episode, without a doubt, is definitely the most painful part of the entire thing. Fry ends up not wanting to bring the clone of Seymour back because, in his mind, Seymour moved on, found a new family, and lived a long, happy life after Fry was gone. But little did he know that was the furthest thing from the truth. Seymour never moved on. Eventually, Fry's own parents would accept that he was gone and would stop looking for him as their lives continued. Seymour, on the other hand, waited in the same exact spot for 12 years and never moved. He never gave up hope that Fry would come back even after more than a decade of absence. And if that isn't the purest example of unconditional love, I don't know what is. On top of all of this though, another thing that hits really hard is realizing why Seymour was waiting in that exact spot. It wasn't because that's where he was used to seeing Fry the most. It was because that was the last command that Fry ever gave him. In the fateful moment that Fry rides away on his delivery bike to make his final delivery, he tells Seymour to stay there and wait for him. And that's exactly what Seymour did up until his final moments of life. This right here just highlights how good of a boy that Seymour was. He was always there to help around the pizza shop and was always excited to see Fry return from a delivery. He was dedicated to Fry even in the many years after he disappeared. The icing on the cake though, without a doubt, has to be the song that plays during the ending sequence here. I don't want to play it because copyright claims from music are pretty much impossible to get past, but if you haven't seen this episode, I strongly recommend getting onto Hulu right now and watching it because the actual episode captures the essence of this moment far better than I ever could here in a comment video on YouTube. I really have to take a moment to commend this episode for its strategic use of the flashbacks. Episodes like this one can tend to get a little messy with the flashbacks, as timelines can quickly get mixed up, but in this one, they did a really great job of conveying a very captivating story in a really strategic way. We see the current story of Fry finding the fossil, getting it back from the museum, and attempting to clone it. Meanwhile, in the background, flashbacks very eloquently tell the story of how Fry built a close bond with Seymour that led to Seymour literally waiting the rest of his life for Fry to come back to him. It's a very captivating use of storytelling mechanisms that I just can't praise this show enough for. Outside of my opinion though, critics felt the same way. This episode would be nominated for an Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program less than 1 hour. On top of that, this episode has been praised by many different critics and included in a slew of best episode lists across multiple different media outlets, some of which went as far as saying that this was one of the saddest endings to a television program that they had ever seen. What's interesting to think though is that this episode was initially planned to be a lot more morbid than the final product actually ended up being. In the commentary of the DVD for this season, it's revealed that the original idea for this episode was to have Fry's mother fossilized. However, that idea was nixed due to it being deemed too morbid and upsetting for their audience. Prior to them settling on the fossil being Fry's dog, they tossed around the idea of it being his father instead, but ultimately that idea was tossed for the same reason. With that being said though, it's interesting to think how different this episode could have played out if instead it was one of Fry's parents who had been fossilized. Personally, I'm satisfied with the fact that it ended up being his dog instead. I feel like it lands a lot better and is something that a lot more people could likely relate to. On top of that, it wouldn't make as much sense for Bender to get jealous over Fry's parents as it does for him to get jealous over Fry's dog. With that in mind though, it's also worth mentioning that later on in the series, the story between Fry and Seymour is revisited and kind of given a bit of a brighter context. This would come in the form of the movie Bender's Big Score. This movie would see a chain of events that led to Fry going back in time and creating a duplicate of himself. This duplicate ends up reuniting with Seymour in the year 2000, caring for him up until the year 2012 when Bender blows up Fry's apartment, and it ends up actually being the blast from the explosion that ends Seymour's life and fossilizes him. This movie, more or less, undid all of the understanding that we had gained from this episode, and instead left us believing that the 12 years that Seymour continued to live was actually spent living happily with a duplicate of Fry instead. Meanwhile, the real Fry still ended up being frozen and sent to the future. I can't help but wonder though, looking back at this entire episode and what happens here, if maybe that was something that they had planned to do all along. What's really interesting about Futurama is its sense of continuity. This show did a fantastic job of dropping massive truth bombs on you that result in you going back and watching earlier episodes in the series that make you realize that they had planned all of this from the start. Case in point, Fry getting frozen. Since the start of the show, it was our understanding that it was an accident that led to him being frozen and sent to the future. However, a few seasons in, we learned that it was actually no accident. Surprisingly, it was intentionally done by a character that you would have never expected to do such a thing. It's explained to us exactly what happened in detail. Then, when you go back and watch the pilot, you know exactly where to look for the hints that were actually there all along. Some of these same exact hints were also included in this episode as well if you look close enough during the scene where Fry gets sealed in the cryogenic chamber. Keep in mind, that pilot in this episode came out years before that truth bomb was dropped. Now, with that context in mind, and relating it to the events of this episode, again, I can't help but wonder if them retconning what happened in Seymour's final 12 years was something that they had thought about doing all along. I guess the biggest thing that makes me wonder this is the shape of Seymour's fossil. Throughout this episode, it's explained that he was fast fossilized. On top of that, the fossil itself is essentially portraying that Seymour passed away standing up. However, the final scene of this episode shows Seymour sitting in his last years until he finally lays down and takes his last breath. It wouldn't make much sense for his fossil to be standing up if he had passed away laying down. With those context clues in mind, I can't help but wonder if maybe the story between these two best friends was always planned to be revisited in the future. I'll say this much, I always had so much fascination with the way Futurama was able to pull these kinds of things off. The amount of foreshadowing in this show, and the way that they were able to string together so many episodes to all tie back to specific episodes in the future of the series, was incredibly impressive. The story of why and how Fry was frozen in particular is one that I feel like deserves an entire video in and of its own, because it really is just such an intricately woven web of storytelling. As far as this particular episode is concerned though, I'm really thankful for it, all things considered. It told a really important and sweet story in a very special way. The ending may have been a real tearjerker, but in order to convey the point that they were trying to make, it was very necessary. The unconditional love that we as people receive from our pets is something that should be cherished and appreciated because, in all reality, it's not going to last forever. Our furry friends only have so much time on this earth with us, and it's really important that we value that time while we have it. because you never know when you might be cryogenically frozen and sent to the future. But what do you guys think? Did this episode hit you like a ton of bricks? Also, if I made more videos about Futurama and other adult cartoons, would you be interested in watching them? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, you already know I have to give a gigantic shout out with love to my patrons, especially those in the true 90s kids tier. Thank you all so much for your support. I honestly couldn't do this without you guys. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and give some praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this video to everyone else. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.